Sahil, please introduce yourself. Tell us where you're telling from, and please tell us a story.
Thanks, Eric. So I'm telling from Bangalore, and I'm going to sort of like read out this story. I've written this personally. So I'm going to read it out and sort of like perform it a little bit. This is my first time here in the festival, so I'm very, very excited about being able to sort of tell the story here. So I call it uh, this is a story of love and a love that will always be remembered. So here goes. It's the 8th of August 2012. I'm waiting impatiently for my girlfriend at her doorway. We are late. Our bus leaves from Shamukense bus stand at 2:30 p.m. It's going to be a long ride till Kanchenjunga, and we had to reach before sunset in order to witness the Bashuki ritual. As I sat outside her house in our ride, my impatience gradually brewing, I was almost about to shout out her name when I saw her stealthily make her way out the door. I watched her walk towards me in that dim streetlight as I tried to outline her face, while staring at the silhouette covering this body that I adored. It was for that one moment that time paused that made everything else seem lifeless before she finally revealed herself. She leaned herself on my chest as a form of embrace, as her arms were laden with travel accessories for the both of us. We sat down in our shared ride, smiling before we settled down in each other's arms. We both knew how excited we were about this trip, and our silence embellished that feeling. I looked out the window, leaving behind the streetlights in the distance, imagining them to be beseeching for company. I woke up with a jerk as the bus jolted to a stop at our destination. Last stop, Madikeri. I frantically looked at my watch. We had an hour to go and it was almost 6 p.m. We didn't have much time. I waved at Tara impatiently, asking her to hurry. Jumping into a shared tempo, 20 long minutes later, we were at our accommodation. I dashed inside, almost colliding into things, kept here and there, my eyes darting around the place, looking for signs of familiarity while processing this new environment. I put on a new set of clothes, changed my camera lens, and shouted at Tara to meet me outside. As we were walking, I found myself thinking about Tara as we set off silently into the darkness. She was a woman who continues to amaze me in so many different ways. Her presence in my life brought a certain harmony in my being that I wish I could articulate more justly. I was always a more restless one, and for a long time, I thought my attitude would be disconcerting for her. She was more contemplative, more composed, and it took me a while before I found out that excitement didn't always necessitate an expression. As our strong strides cut through the rain, as we edged closer to the place where the ritual was taking place, my anticipation grew. I imagined what it would be like for someone looking at us from a distance, two figures with their heads down in a synchronized motion, walking with an inexplicable sense of purpose into what seemed like nothingness. I had discovered this trail about 6 months ago while exploring the town of Ajesta. I ran a private blog on my website, accessible only to a few. We called ourselves preservationists. Apart from my research on indigenous cultures, I also created fictionalized stories for children, filled with images of landscapes that they had never seen. I wrote about stories that seemed fantastical but were deeply embedded in these places that I had seen and experienced. For this reason, also, these places needed to remain unexplored by the majority. How far are we? Asked Tara. I knew she was getting impatient, and the truth was that I had no idea. We had been walking for over 2 hours now, and I was a little exhausted as well. Nevertheless, pressing on, we came across this stream alongside these huge rock formations. These were the kind of formations I have never seen before and resembled none of the pictures that I referred to quickly in my mind. They were dark gray, a splash of purple mixed with a mossy green, but there was something about them that seemed really out of place. They seemed like they didn't belong there. It felt like these formations were the remnants of a lost city, of a civilization so long ago that it looked like nothing that you'd ever seen. I immediately took out my camera to capture these rocks and realized that it was out of battery. That's odd, I said to myself. I charged it before we left. I took out my phone camera to find out that that was out of battery too. I turned to ask for Tara's phone, and to my horror, I found out that she was no longer behind me. Trying to stay calm, I darted into the forest and tried calling out her name as loudly as I could. I had to be careful so I wouldn't attract any wild animals and kept close to the path as much as I could. About 5 minutes later, I spotted her walking, carefully maneuvering around the broken path, almost as if being led by someone. I called out her name in exasperation, and she looked back and just smiled. She waved out her hand, signaling for me to follow her. As I caught up to her and held her hand, she looked at me with a fierceness in her eyes I had never seen before. I immediately let go of her hand, and she instructed me to just follow her. Confused and scared, I trailed back silently as she led me into the unknown. I tried whispering her name, Tara, to just tell me where we were going, but she kept walking. She finally stopped at a clearing in the forest, looked around, and said, "This is it." She seemed distant, aloof, disengaged with her immediate environment, yet there was a surety in her stance and clarity in her eyes. I asked her to tell me what was going on. She looked at me, her eyes piercing through my soul as if daring me to breathe. After a long pause, she said, "This was the place I died 100 years ago." She said this so matter of factly that I didn't know how to respond. "This was the place I decided to leave my body," she went on. "In my previous birth, my husband and I had dedicated our lives to building a consecrated space for this village. In order to complete this consecration, one of us had to leave our physical body, using this energy in its rawest form for the creation of this space. But something had gone terribly wrong," she said, her voice almost inaudible. "I wasn't supposed to be the one leaving. It was supposed to be him." While we were performing the ceremony and deep in our meditations, I felt a love that I knew I would never feel, and that was the moment I decided to leave on my own terms," said Tara. As she was reciting this to me, there were tears flowing uncontrollably from her eyes. "That changed everything," she said. "Her husband, her lover, her partner, and her were never able to unite. She looked at me and she said, I have spent lifetimes waiting for this union, but never been able to. This feels like a curse," she said painfully, "that a physical body remembers through lifetimes. In this lifetime, I have returned in the form of Tara to go back to my lover," she said. Scared to even breathe, I decided to ask her what she had to do. I didn't have the space to process my own emotions as I just stood there watching my lover pine for hers. It was a long while before she finally spoke. When she did, all she said was, "I need to wait." When she uttered those words, it felt like the life had been sucked out of me in an instant and would never find its way back. I was breathing heavily, my mind trying to conjure up ways to get out of this situation. In the midst of this internal battle, suddenly from nowhere, an eagle swooped down and perched itself on the broken piece of the bamboo branch from the nearby tree. I was not shocked when I saw that eagle land like that. I've been to many places, stayed with many communities that have revered eagles, so the timing did not necessarily seem odd. But what came next was something I had never seen. "Are you sure about this?" The eagle opened its beak to ask Tara. I thought I imagined this, and I shut my eyes and I opened them again and saw that the eagle's eyes were transfixed on Tara. She looked unperturbed by this intrusion. Her head was down, her hands absent-mindedly fiddling with a twig in the mud, and it felt like we had passed through multiple time capsules before the eagle spoke again. "You know what the consequences are, don't you? This is not the first time that you're doing this. We have been here before. There isn't much time left this time around. The bamboo isn't broken yet. This time it's going to be different," Tara said. All right, Tara, be with the river. She'll guide you, responded the eagle and just flew away. I did not know what to make of this conversation. I was just sitting there with my mouth opening, wondering what this means. Am I actually listening to an eagle talk? Is Tara, the person that I have known for over 6 years now, responding to this eagle? Did they just talk about speaking to the river? Tara got up, ready to leave, and signaled for me to come. I followed her like a headless sheep, blindly following its shepherd's calls. As we were walking, I asked Tara if she could tell me what all of this meant. I need to know what's going on, I said pleadingly. She took a deep sigh and nodded. She said, I know your desire to understand. I'm going to try and explain this to you in the best way that I can. That's all I can really do. Ask me any questions that you have. Who is this eagle? And am I imagining this eagle talking? I blurted out. One can say that you are imagining this. The eagle is not talking to us in the words that you know, but your body and breath have come with an understanding of a resonant communication with all sentient beings. You are talking all the time with these beings. The only difference is that they aren't talking back. They understand your fear and are afraid themselves that man will destroy them if you were to find out about this. So this is just your mind comprehending in words the communication that your body already knows. This is because the eagle has tapped into a part of your mind, some which refer to as the unconscious, some which refer to as the memory, and is now choosing to communicate with you. I tried my best to wrap my head around this and I asked, where are we going? Are we going to go and speak to the river in the same way? Yes, Tara replied. We have to be careful though. The river may seem calm, but that is because you have not witnessed her anger. All women have embraced the river. All women around the world come with a memory of the first woman who came from the river to step on this earth in human form. She is contained inside all women. It was the river who threw her out. She was impregnated by fire, and it was the child of this procreation that was meant to awaken the woman in all of us. She is the eternal mother, Tara said. He entrusted the wind to carry this knowledge, for it is the one who listens to the wind that is said to be awakened. For she who is born again comes to the river and remembers the old wise woman, the keeper. This might seem difficult to understand. I do not expect you to. All I want from you is to trust that even though it doesn't make sense right now, it will. We finally came to the spot next to the river. We are here, she said. The river seems calm, I said innocently. Yes, she is. She knows why we are here. Gather some twigs and let's light a fire, Tara said gently. I felt relieved when she said that. It felt like moving my hands would catapult me out of this reality, reassuring me that this is real, that I am real. As I got busy gathering twigs, I saw a bamboo branch hanging from a really old tree. Weird. Almost like the one that I saw before, I thought to myself. My eyes darted towards Tara and I saw her kneeling before the river. Her eyes were shut, her head was lowered, and she seemed to be muttering something under her breath. I honor you. I come before you. I felt these words like a whisper creep up to me with a gush of wind, and I felt it all along my spine, even though I was standing at a distance away from Tara. Before I could wait to comprehend what had just happened, I saw a form emerging from the river. I stood there paralyzed with fear. As this form came closer, I could make out the silhouette of a naked woman walking towards Tara. My impulse was to scream, but somehow I resisted this urge and I watched in absolute shock. This woman came and sat down next to Tara. Tara's eyes were still shut and her head still lowered. I tiptoed closer to get a look at this woman. My eyes widened as I took in everything about her. Her hair was long and tattered with huge locks. It covered at least 3 feet distance around her, like a boundary of some sorts. It also moved to the different pitches of the wind, as if in constant communion. Her nails were like claws and her arms were wrinkled yet strong. But you know what moved me the most? It was her face. Her eyes were filled with compassion and a smile that could save even the dying. She sat with her left arm gently resting on her left knee, twiddling her fingers just like a 6-year-old child. She waited patiently for Tara to open her eyes, smiling at her, waiting. When Tara finally did, she looked at her and burst into tears. You came for me, she said, in between loud, howling cries. Of course I would. It has been a long time, the woman said. You have been waiting for a long time. I cannot leave, Tara said. I have traveled too far. I have given everything, she screamed at the woman. Put me through the test and I will die again. I am ready to die in every life if it means I can go back. There are no more tests, my dear Leela. There is nothing more you have to do. I promised him, she sobbed. I promised him I would wait. I was standing at a close distance away from them when suddenly the wind just pushed me forward. I felt like my feet had a mind of their own. And as I looked down on them, I couldn't understand, I couldn't comprehend how I was walking. I reached the spot they were sitting at and looked at them, helpless and confused. Tara did not look up at me when I sat down. She continued sobbing with her head down as this woman looked straight at me and said, Purushottama, tell her, Purushottama, tell her that she can go. Tara looked up at her in disbelief. What? She said. I looked at both of them helplessly, not knowing what to say. I don't know, I spat out. The woman laughed with a crackling sound and she said, Don't play, Purshottama, it is time. You know it. Just as she said that, I opened my mouth almost as if an invisible hand was making me do so and said the words, It's okay, Leela. You can go. Hearing this, Tara screamed with all her insides while the woman held her in a tight embrace. It felt like the ground beneath us was shaking with the weight of her tears. The wind was whistling at a frequency that made me shut my ears. The trees were swaying as if they wanted to be uprooted. Enough, Leela, the woman said sternly. The wind stopped whistling. The trees stopped swaying and the ground stopped shaking. Tara looked up at me for the first time, her eyes filled with tears. Underneath those tears, I saw love. She reached for my hand and she said, Thank you, Purshottama. This invisible force that was still inside of me was guiding every word that was coming out. I've always loved you, Leela. We are already together. Tara smiled as I said that and looked into the eyes of the strange woman. She nodded as I sat there, feeling a love that was beyond anything I had ever experienced. The woman gently picked her up and started walking towards the river. I stood up watching as I saw Tara, my Tara, leave with this woman. The woman casually looks back at me, the old wise woman looks back at me and said, Just call for the eagle, Purushottam. He knows. I smiled as I saw both their silhouettes fade into the darkness, into the river. I looked around, and for the first time, it felt like I could hear the melody of the birds so clearly, so perfectly. I could feel this cosmic pool of energy engulf me as I stood there with my eyes shut. My heartbeat felt like it was in sync with the earth's. In my mind, I saw a woman in a forest, a woman dancing with joy, a woman liberated. Tara, I said. I let out a loud laugh as I picked up that branch. I looked around, my eyes rested on that bamboo branch now fallen down on the earth. I walked towards the path that would lead me home. My name is Kashti. I am the son of my mother and my father Krishna and Geeta. I am alive. I said out aloud for the earth, the sun, the moon, the stars, the birds, the trees, the flowers, for everyone who was listening. This is Kashti's story. I hope I get to meet Kashti someday.
Thank you.
Anybody thoughts?
Thank you, Sahil, for this lovely story. I was so mesmerized by the whole thing that and I was wondering, have you thought of joining Audible? Maybe you would be a great storyteller for the Audible series.
I don't know what audible is, Jasmine.
Oh,
Sorry.
it's Audible is where they read books, and it is sent out to everyone. And your voice was great, but the most allowed was your vocal variety that got us all mesmerized, or it was so beautifully done. Now you're a story writer as well. You wrote the story, so that adds more to it. So I think it was great. I just was, I mean, it was totally an enchanting story that was beautiful.
Thank you,
It took
Jasmine. Thank you
us,
so much.
of course, you read it, but so to remember all those facts was great. I mean, to read it was wonderful, but I thought you did a absolutely wonderful job. Thank you.
Thank you, Jasmine.
Sahil, um, I really was moved by your story. I felt that if it were in a book, it was great. You were nervous at the beginning, so even though you had rushing moments and calm moments, you didn't reside in the calm moments as much. You gradually got there. Um, but be careful if you're going to make this a story where you're not reading. You can never get so quiet that the audience can't hear you. Okay. And so, and the variety that you did, the up and the down, that was wonderful. I really saw the images in so many places. Your writing, as a writer, I would definitely suggest, making a book, because it has all the trappings. If you're going to areas that I think that might really be something to add, is that the senses. You had visual sensory a lot, which was wonderful, but think of smell, think of how it feels in your body, like when you were there and you were being forced to move, maybe the ground underneath you, how did it feel as your foot against your own volition was touching the ground, that it was, because you really visually had me. But if you added those other things, I would have been transported away completely. So think of smell, think of touch, think sound, especially with the eagle when it landed, that noise. But I do think you should get out there, and whether it's as a storyteller or as a writer, but get out there and share this, because this was um it was just so present. Do you know what I mean? It was like I was there, and that's what a storyteller is supposed to do, is bring you there. But those were just points that I thought might help you think about the story a little differently. But again, I was really appreciative that I was up and I saw this today.
Thank you so much. Wow, Judy, thank you so much. This is so valuable. Because I don't know if I can sort of take these notes down actually, because I think a lot of what you're saying makes so much sense. And this is something like even the sights and the smells and the sounds was something that I was thinking about as well. And I think I sort of just, I made it like one dimensional in the sense when I was looking at it like visually. And I think just adding so many different dimensions to it, I think just for this experience in itself would be so valuable. Or in the story, in the forest, because I was thinking about those things, I was visualizing those things, but I didn't write them down. So I think
No, and
that.
that's great. I mean, and it depends on how long the story is. You might want to even take a section, like that beginning part was lovely, but really the heart of the story for me was when you saw the rock, okay? And when you wanted to get a picture of that rock down the path, I mean, if you really wanted to, deepen this one section, and from there to the point where the story ends, right? The only time I was thrown out was when the woman, the goddess from the river, she said, "Go ask the eagle," and you never asked the eagle. I was
Yeah.
waiting for the eagle to be asked. So don't put it in there if you're not going to ask the eagle. It would be my own recommendation. But if from that point of the rock, and you really got the sounds and the smells and the, what it might have tasted like for you, like, so that the person is really being thrown in with their whole body. Like sometimes when they possessed you in different things, that I just think you could enrich that. And then depending on how long you want the story, you can put in the other parts. But if you have to make it concise from there to the end of the story and really enrich it, it had such heart. I mean, it was like, I don't know. I mean, some stories really catch you. And for me, this story caught me and I wanted to know more. And I was afraid because of the time that I wouldn't get to hear the end. And that's a great storyteller. When I'm afraid that the time you're allowed, you're going to not have the time to do it. And that's great. That to me is a great storyteller.
Wonderful. Thank you. Wow, Judy. Thank you.
Actually, the more you will tell the story, the more you will be able to put the elements which Judy is talking about. Because while you're speaking loudly, you hear it and your sensories are working. So you need to keep telling and keep reworking. So you can divide the part of the stories. Don't do it full at one go. And, visualize it, taste it in your mouth, uh, walk here and there, whatever, do it everywhere, So if you are into the story, it will come out. Everything will come out. You just have to dig yourself into it. You know, you do that, and I think Judy's suggestions were fantastic. You have the making of an author, great author. Go for it.
Sahil, when I was listening to you, I felt like as though a rhythm was playing. Like it was like a song and a music and a movement happening, with every clipping of you telling. And you had that Sarah K kind of a telling, like a moving and rhythm that you were sharing and breathing in and breathing out. So a particular song that kept coming to my mind while you were telling your story, the song is very popular one. It's like this. कहना ही क्या ये नैन एक अनजान से, but the song, the original song and the song to your story just changed its meaning.
In what sense? I don't know.
Like there was a, like how Judy shared, there's a sense of curiosity. Like now what's going to happen, and now what's going to happen. So I think that brought in the feeling, and I was like, now what's going to happen? Like some mystery is going to happen, some unraveling taking place. So I think that's the feel I got through the telling. So yeah, it's a good story. I think 2-3 development will change some parts, but essence will stay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sahil.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Much.